No systemic racism in the UK, says new report.
Mr. Reagan.
Now, spring is here, and what do we do in spring? Spring cleaning. The mower needs to be sorted, the garden looks a little bit wrecked, and the barbecue needs some work. You might enjoy doing these jobs, but if you don't, or you can't, you're going to need to pay somebody else, and that takes a bit of money. And let's face it, putting money aside for comfortable retirement is the only way that you're going to get out of doing the lawn yourself, right? And if you got a little bit of money saved up in the bank, well, that way you can visit the kids, you can hike the trail, you can play golf, all the things that your friends are doing. And Noble Gold can help with this by investing in precious metals along with your other investments. A gold or silver IRA is a great way of doing this. And this month, Noble Gold is gifting a genuine rare Carson City minted Morgan silver dollar with every qualifying IRA or 401k that you invest with. And this thing is fantastic. I mean, even just the case, I love this thing. See, because I actually really love old coins and stuff like that. And it's absolutely beautiful. I looked it up, and these things are a nice little chunk of change, and it's genuinely old. I mean, apparently these things were distributed in the 70s. They were obviously minted in the 19th century. In 1964, after a century in obscurity in the vaults. So these were in like the vaults. And so in the 1960s, they were like, okay, let's go ahead and distribute these. And I think the initial offering was like $15, and all these collectors bought them up. But yeah, now that you can get one in this nifty case, I mean, this thing, it's beautiful. It really is sort of like an old-fashioned thing that you can have, and it reminds you of better days in America when everybody wasn't so woke and crazy. People say that, oh, if you're nostalgic for the old times, you're nostalgic for oppression. No. If you're nostalgic for the old times, you're nostalgic for a time in America where people respected things like morality and ethics and not like wokeness and horrible things like that. But when people they actually had a sense of integrity. And I think people long for those days. All right, so if you want one of these Carson City coins and you want to invest in an IRA or a 401k, get in touch with the experts at noblegoldinvestments.com or call 877-646-5347 and talk to the experts now. That's 877-646-5347, or you can go to the website noblegoldinvestments.com or click the link in the description below. According to a report by the UK government, this is being reported in The Independent, although it's being reported pretty much everywhere in the UK right now because it's very controversial. The government did a report, and they said there is no actual institutional racism. There is no systemic racism.
What about Meghan Markle?
Well, they're not saying that there are no racists in the UK at all. But what they're saying is that their laws and their system of government and the way that they function as a society doesn't create a system that is racist against anyone, except white people. I would actually argue that if that report was fully investigated, they would find that people were racist against white people. I bet you anything that would happen. That there was a lot, especially in like London, places that are like very, that consider themselves very progressive areas. I'm sure you will find racism against white people, but they weren't looking for that, were they? So let's have a look here. Institutional racism doesn't exist, government's Race Commission suggests in landmark report. Commission says overt and outright racism persists, but says UK should be an example to other white majority countries. No, it shouldn't, because none of us are systemically racist. None of us are institutionally racist. None of the white countries are. Okay, if anything, we're all anti-white, which I think is completely insane. But anyway, let me keep reading this beautiful article here. Well, I don't know how beautiful it is, but about this beautiful report. The government's highly anticipated race report, commissioned in the wake of the Black Lives Matter protest, has rejected suggestions that Britain is still an institutionally racist country. The 264-page report concludes that the UK has become a more open society where children from many ethnic communities perform as well or substantially better than white pupils in compulsory education. Well, that's disturbing. They certainly shouldn't be performing substantially better than white people. If other races are performing substantially better than white people, maybe you're racist against white people. Maybe that's see. There's this idea, especially amongst like leftists and like these people who consider themselves very sophisticated, that in a culture that is majority white, it's not possible for the majority to be biased against themselves. So they never look for it. They never consider it. Because why would you act against your own self-interest? Well, the problem
Because
is,
you're stupid.
well, it's not just, but the thing is, white people don't consider ourselves a homogenous group.
It's just what was
A homogenous group means a group of one type, or like, you know, let's see here, not separated.
okay. Okay, I got it. It's like me when I see Ukrainians and you consider us all the same. I was like, no, we're not the same.
Right, like
not
all
the
Eastern
same.
Europeans
Yeah.
to Americans are considered a homogenous group, but to
Not to.
an Eastern European, you guys are considered heterogeneous. I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
You get distinct into various categories. Yeah, so Hispanics are more distinct than maybe other groups in America, but a lot of Hispanics, I think, consider themselves, because you have Hispanic organizations, stuff like that, Latino organizations. So there are many people who consider Hispanics to be a kind of a, you know, one group. And then, you know, black people in America are kind of like a group amongst themselves. There are certain other kinds of communities. Why did I bring that up? You got me on the word homogenous, and now I
Yes,
got all.
I didn't know what was.
But white people don't. I think that maybe it has something to do with the fact that we are the majority and we've been here for so long. Like, I don't consider myself sort of like culturally similar to Antifa types. You know what I mean? And there are just a lot of different kinds of people in America within white culture. So you will have like academics, right? You know, I went to college. It wasn't a great college, but I went to college. And a lot of my professors were these just, you know, smug, self-righteous a-holes. And they're always talking about like having martinis on a veranda and crap like that. And I just always just thought to myself, you are such a pretentious piece of human garbage. I couldn't stand these people. I hate college professors as a rule. There are some that I have liked in the past, but in general, I hate university professors. At least most of the ones that I've interacted with. And if there's some university professors out there watching the show, I do apologize. I probably wouldn't hate you. But yeah, I mean, there is this culture amongst, you know, within academia that is just repugnant. It is repugnant with smugness. I think that's a kind of like a beautiful phrase, repugnant with smugness. I think I should write a book called that. The autobiography of Christopher Patrick Coles. All right, let's see here. So what I was going to say about that is that, white people don't really consider ourselves a homogenous group. So if we look at like, you know, the college professors, and then we look at somebody like, you know, folks that live in the Ozarks, right? Or Ozarks are kind of like a poor area, like where there's a lot of white people. You know, like the Appalachian Mountain people, like the people that live up there, very poor, white. You know, a lot of people in these regions have like meth problems, stuff like that. Obviously, a very different culture than, you know, the academic left, or, you know, people who are in Antifa, or, you know, conservative church-going farmers or something like that, right? You have like very distinct different groups in America culturally, despite the fact that there's you know, we're all white, you know, when we're talking about white Americans. And so I think that if a leftist is going to do something that helps black people and ignores struggling white people, they don't really think of it as hurting themselves, because we don't think of hurting another white person as hurting ourselves, right? A black person may think that, well, I don't want to do anything that hurts the black community. White people don't think, I don't want to do anything that hurts the white community. I mean, just saying that, it sounds funny. I mean, like maybe like white nationalists maybe think like that, or white supremacists or something. But the typical white person doesn't think, I don't want to do something to hurt the white community. But you do hear black people say stuff like that. And so I think this is actually a huge problem, because you know, we have to start thinking like that in some way. Not because we need to think of white people as a community in America, but rather, like, I think we do have to take into account, just because to try to be decent human beings, you have to look at who is struggling in the world, who's truly struggling, and say, well, if we're going to help somebody, we should help the people who are most struggling. The people who are most struggling aren't always black. They're not always Hispanic. They're not always LGBT. They're not always trans. They're not always immigrants. You know, some of them are straight white men. I know. It sounds crazy, but some of them are. So, you need to try to, I think, put the resources to help people where they're needed as opposed to where you want to put them to make yourself look good, right? And I think they do that a lot in the UK. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent, but I think that is a valuable one. Shall I keep reading?
Yes, of course.
Thank you, darling. The Independent Review, which is published on Wednesday, argues that issues around race and racism are becoming less important and, in some cases, are not a significant factor behind explaining disparities. No kidding. I never would have guessed that. I've never said anything like that on my show. All right, let's see here. However, race advisors have warned that Britain is not a post-racial society and that overt and, well, we're never going to become a post-racial society. There's always going to be races. That's a weird thing to say. Should we strive to be a post-racial society? I don't think so. I like the fact that there's black people in the world. I like the fact that there's Hispanics. I like the fact that there's Asians. I need people to look down on.
You don't sound like a racist.
Come on, darling, you're supposed to laugh at that. Oh, good. That's my charity laugh.
No, it's actually funny.
Of course it's funny, but you're supposed to react like organically. Anyway, that's good. I deal with this in real. This is not just for the show. This happens. I tell hilarious jokes, completely blank stare. Anyway, so but yeah, no. I don't like all of these different groups being distinct so I can look down on them. That was a joke, obviously. But I just like the variety. I like to have variety in the world. I like to have different cultures, not necessarily all in the same place. I want to go to China and experience Chinese culture. I want to go to Taiwan and experience Taiwanese culture. I want to go to Japan and experience Japanese culture, and then I want to travel maybe to I don't know, Africa and experience some kind of African culture, and I want to go to India and experience that culture.
Jamaica.
And Jamaica, sure, yeah, absolutely, and then maybe to Iceland and experience that culture. I like these distinctions we have. We don't want a post-racial
Russia to experience dirt.
Dirt, because it's a dirty country. But I don't want a post-racial world. I don't want a post-racial world. I want a world with different races. You can have a world with races and just respect people of other races. You don't need things to be post-racial. That's mental. I think post-multicultural would be good. We don't need multiculturalism. That's a big disaster. Okay, however, race advisors, so stupid,
Race advisors.
have warned that Britain is not a post-racial society and that overt and outright racism persists in the UK, particularly online. You know what I don't like about this whole there's a lot of racism online nonsense? My guess, and you guys can tell me what you think about this in the comments, my guess is that something like 90% of the online, racist attacks are by kids, are by 13-year-old boys. Kids are really vicious, and kids will use whatever it is that they think that's going to hurt you, they're going to use it against you. So if you're fat, they're going to call you fat. If you run like a girl, they're going to say you run like a girl. If you're ugly, they're going to say you're ugly. I mean, kids are ruthless. So if you're a black person and you think maybe that person might be a little bit sensitive about being black, you may call them the N-word as a child, right? Especially if you're told you should never call a black person that. Then the kid will be like, fantastic, new weapon, right? Because kids are a little bit, they're totally irrational, first of all. They have no sense of rationality or how it might affect them. All they care about is, I'm in an argument with somebody, I don't like them, they're pissing me off, I'm going to lash out at them in whatever way that I can. Call them gay, call them fat, call them a girl, call them ugly, call them, the N-word or whatever it is. And so because of that, I think that people do sometimes grow up thinking, I heard this word when I was a kid growing up, therefore white people are still racist. And I don't think that's a good indication of a racist society, actually. I don't think that we're a society that is particularly cruel to fat people or to, I think we've actually become a society that's more cruel to whatever groups we think are in have an advantage, right? So skinny girls have an advantage, and skinny girls are ridiculed relentlessly by society. Beautiful people.
I know. Was skinny and beautiful.
All right. Right. White people are considered to have an advantage, so you can ridicule white people and it's fine. Men are considered to have an advantage. You can ridicule them, it's fine, right? And there's a long tradition of this historically, like Shakespeare used to mock the aristocracy, right? So that's something that's kind of natural, I think, which is fine. The problem, I think, today is that the groups that we think of as, maybe being at a disadvantage are no longer really at such a disadvantage. And the group that we think of, they're no longer at such a disadvantage. And the groups that we think of as advantaged are no longer quite as advantaged as we think. So I think our perception of who is struggling is, and who is thriving maybe isn't perfectly in line with reality anymore. And so I think we have to kind of reassess who we're willing to mock and who we're willing to cut down, and who we're willing to raise up and who we're willing to help. Because I think we're helping a lot of people who don't need it, and we're cutting down a lot of people who are already suffering. Anyway, again, I'm rambling. Let's get back to the story. Now, hold on. I would like to also comment on this. Sorry, one more tangent. I'm so sorry. But this is critical, I think. In my mind, Europe isn't for everyone. Each European country is for the natives of that particular country. They have the sort of born right to that land. If you went into the Brazilian rainforest and you said, I'm going to put up a McDonald's right near that tribe, and I'm going to collect gemstones for every Big Mac I produce for them, the world would lose their minds. Because why? Because you are starting to destroy that culture, right? You're starting to destroy that very precious culture. But we don't seem to have that same kind of outrage when it comes to Europeans. If we have a huge influx of Muslims from somewhere in the Middle East or Syria or something like that coming into, say, Germany, and literally burning down churches. And this is a huge problem in France. I was going to do a video about this recently. I never got around to it, but I should do this one. They're burning down, they'll go up to these mountaintops. There was this tradition in Europe for a long time to go to the top of a mountain, and when you get there, you put a Christian cross at the top. And these Muslims are climbing up to the top of these mountains and knocking down the crosses just because they're bigots. Really, they hate Christians. And the authorities are talking about this as a problem, but they're not saying who's doing it. They're saying, we don't know who's done this. Yeah, I'm sure it's a bunch of Christians going up there knocking down their own crosses. 100%. I'm sure that's who's doing it. Yeah.
Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah, it's Jehovah's Witnesses. Yeah, we know who's doing it. And it's a tragedy. I don't think that this.
Actually, that might be Jehovah's Witnesses because they don't accept cross.
That's true. Jehovah's Witnesses don't like the cross, but I don't think it's the Jehovah's Witnesses. I don't think it's Jehovah's Witnesses.
This.
But we do have outright racism here in the United States, and they do have outright racism, outright and overt racism in the UK, and I've witnessed it. I've witnessed it here. I've witnessed it there. I used to live in the UK for a little while, and I can tell you, it's not from white people. It's from black people against white people. It's from what they call Asians in the UK against white people. Asians in the UK are like from Pakistan or India, places like that. They're not. They don't call people from China or Japanese Asian. They call people from India and Pakistan Asian. It's very strange. Yeah. I don't know what they call people from China and Japan and Korea. I guess they just call them all Chinese. I don't know. I should ask somebody. I've never heard. There's just very, very few Koreans, Japanese, and Chinese people in the UK. I'm curious what they call it because Asians are usually referred to as Pakistanis and stuff. All right. And one of my best friends is Pakistani British. I should mention that. So despite the fact that I complain about them a lot because of like the grooming gangs and stuff like that, I don't specifically think that if you're Pakistani in the UK, you're a horrible person, obviously. I hate that I have to say stuff like that, but you never know. You never know who's watching. Somebody, yeah. Anyway, all right. So let's.
In the beginning of every show, you have to mention.
Yeah.
I have friends.
Yeah.
Hispanic gay guy, yes. Pakistani, and the others, whatever.
I actually had a dream once. This is, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. At the time, for whatever reason, I'm not really sure why, I just had a lot of multi-ethnic friends. Like I barely had any
Asian.
white.
You have Asian.
Yeah, Asian, Black, Hispanic, whatever. And I had this weird dream where I was on a train And all my friends were hanging out with me. It was like I had some friends in the next seat, a friend next to me, some friends behind me. So all my friends were on the train with me, and I looked around. I remember thinking in the dream, this is in the dream, I looked around and I was like, I got to get some more white friends. Like every single one of my friends at that time was of some other color. Like I had no white friends. It was like a weird thing. And in my life, I just have had a lot of not white friends. I have a couple of friends who I would guess were white. Like if I had met them and I didn't know them, I'd guess they're white. But they're from Cuba. They're Cuban. But they're very Spanish looking. I mean, they don't look, like you would expect a Latino, like tan skinned Latino to look. They're just as white as, I mean, they look like me essentially.
I don't think you look like a white person.
Yeah, yeah, true. Anyway, I don't know. Again, another tangent. My apologies, but yeah, there's this. I mean, it's just so stupid. This idea that conservatives are all racist, Republicans are all racist, but that does provide me, I think, to some degree, a level of courage when it comes to talking about racial stuff. Because this whole BS about you're not allowed to criticize black people, you're not allowed to talk about this stuff. I mean, I have never met a black person and said, "Oh, I'm like a little bit hesitant to be friends with you because you're black or Hispanic or Asian." Those things have never really crossed my mind my entire life. So when we're kind of accused of that kind of stuff, either subtly or directly, it drives me crazy. And part of the reason is because it's just not my life experience, and so I feel like a lot more bold to criticize people about that sort of stuff, those accusations. So let's see here. Ahead of the report's release, a government summary states, the landmark report challenges the view that Britain has failed to make progress in tackling racial inequality, suggesting the well-meaning idealism of many young people who claim the country is still institutionally racist is not borne out by evidence. But here's the problem. So they've done this study. They've realized there is not this like crazy racism problem in the UK anymore. And as soon as they put this report out and it hit the papers, everybody went flipping mental. Like everybody in the UK right now is going crazy because of this report. They're saying basically like this is BS. This is a biased report. This can't possibly be true. Obviously, people are making jokes that it's an April Fool's joke because it came out on April 1st.
Oh, no.
Yeah. It comes after numerous reports published last year cited evidence of structural inequalities, including the Public Health England review of disparities in the risk outcomes of COVID. But see, the problem is like if there's a particular race that catches COVID more easily or dies more easily or is more obese or something like that, it's not because of racism. But their thought is if black people are fat, it must somehow.
See, Meghan Markle. Sorry.
It must somehow be due to racism. If black people are unhealthy, it's due to some like white oppression, and therefore, if you're unhealthy and you can die easier from COVID, then it must be white people's fault. The PHE probe found that given the limitations of the PHE review, work was specifically called for on the socioeconomic, occupational, cultural, and structural factors, racism, discrimination, stigma, influencing COVID outcomes in BAME communities. BAME is this expression that they have now. What is it? It's basically not white people. I should look that up quickly. It's a thing in the UK. They don't use it here in the United States yet. Let's see. BAME is an abbreviation, Black, Asian, and Minority Ethnic. Basically used to refer to anybody not white. It's awful. It's just basically pure racism. All right, let's see here. I mean, because when you exclude one group only, like everybody's included except you. That's what racism is, right? It's sort of like, I mean, again, you just have to replace white with some other group, right? If you say everybody's included but except for white people, that's considered fine. But if you say everybody's accepted except for the Jews, oh, then obviously it's totally bigoted. See, everybody's allowed in here except for blacks. They used to have these signs like no blacks, no Irish, and no dogs.
Really?
They used to have that in stores.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? And now it's just no whites, no Irish, and no dogs. Now that's the new sign. Okay, let's see here. While the Lawrence Review, commissioned by the Labour Party and led by Baroness Doreen Lawrence, she even just sounds leftist, concluded that decades of structural discrimination led to the disproportionate impact of the pandemic on minority ethnic communities. Give me a frickin' break. I think that a lot of these studies, they go to conduct the studies with the conclusion already in mind, right? The conclusion is there is institutionalized racism, there is systemic racism. Now let's go try to find evidence of it. And so these are constructed with the idea in mind. We're assuming that it exists, and we're just looking for evidence of it. Whereas this new study seems to have been accurate, which I don't know how the hell that happened. It's not 100% accurate because it didn't indicate that there was racism against white people, but I think probably if they produced that, there would have been they would have burned down Parliament or something crazy. So here's the problem, right? So the Independent has written, we've got this new study that says there's no longer any kind of systemic racism in the UK, and then they cite all these other studies that kind of suggest maybe there still is. So they're like, well, let's just,
there is no more because Meghan Markle moved to America.
Yeah, so no
There
more
is no more
systemic
racism,
racism.
yeah.
So they're basically just like, in this article, we want to prepare balance because we don't want people to think we're supporting this this study. So let's put in all the other studies that contradict it. In 2019, Black African pupils performed above their white British counterparts on average in GCSE exams. GCSE is sort of like their final exams in school, and I think they deal with the GCSEs help them to get into university, sort of like our SATs do to some degree. Okay, let me keep reading from that. While Black Caribbean pupils were the only ethnic group who performed lower than white British pupils, new research commissioned by the group found. Okay, so Black Africans in the UK, they actually separate Black Africans from what they call Afro-Caribbean, or people from like Jamaica and the Caribbean islands. What's really weird about that is the Afro-Caribbeans hate the Black Africans. They don't like each other. I actually had a friend who was Afro-Caribbean named Louis, but the way he would speak was like almost incomprehensible to me because I knew him, we were friends, but I didn't know him so well that I could understand him whenever he talked, because if he'd get excited, like we hadn't seen each other in a while, we literally just ran into each other in London one day. And he's like, "Oh, Chris, mate, I could not, it was just mumbling. He was so London. He was so London. But a buddy of mine, so like he was in a restaurant with my friend Robbie, who's from Mauritius, actually, which is interesting. And he gets up and he goes to this table where these Africans are at, and he's like, "Oi, I don't like to see your kind in here, blah, 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 blah." He starts like yelling at them, and Robbie's got to like grab him and pull him away because these guys are like these huge dudes. And the deal is that the Afro-Caribbeans, very much like Black Americans will still blame white people today for slavery, the Afro-Caribbeans blame the Black Africans for selling them to the white people, which I think is fascinating. It's like, obviously these Black Africans didn't sell anybody that he knows specifically, but maybe their ancestors did or something like that. So that's his thought. But anyway, it's kind of funny how that whole dynamic works over there. So Black Africans are considered different in the UK than Afro-Caribbeans. But the Afro-Caribbeans are the only group that performed lower than white people. Africans actually performed higher. The commission has suggested that some communities continue to be haunted by historic cases of racism, creating a deep mistrust in the system which prevent them from being successful. The report makes 24 recommendations, including the commissioning of further research. Look, you don't need to make recommendations. It's very simple. If you want Black people to perform as well as white people on standardized testing, create a private school system. Privatize all your schools, right? Every different group, every different neighborhood will have education that's catered toward them, that's specifically designed to help them. Why? Because you have these private institutions that have to compete for your students, compete for your money that the government pays for the school, but it goes through the student. So if I create a school and I have 1,000 students, and this guy over here creates a school and he's only got 100 students, he only gets the revenue from the government for those 100 students. I get the revenue of 1,000 students. So if I produce a better school, I get more students, I win, and therefore you competition always breeds success. Always breeds success, and that's what would happen under a privatized system. Some people think it'll just happen like the college system, where it'll just become more and more and more expensive, and certainly that'll probably happen in some instances. But there are measures that can be taken against that. I mean, we've done a pretty good job with private schools in America so far, and what do you call those schools that are like quasi-private? Charter schools.
Quasi-private.
Well, anyway, the point is that there's a new report in the UK that says systemic racism is no longer a problem, and people are going crazy hearing it. People do not like to hear that racism is over. People desperately want there to be racism. And I think that the main reason is because they want something to fight against. They want to be able to say, there's all this horrible racism and I have to fight it, because people want to be heroes. And I say that's a good thing. You should be a hero. But find a real victim and fight for them. Don't fight for the fake victims. Shall we move on to the next story?
Yeah.
Okay.
I am eternally optimistic, and I happen to believe that we've made great progress from the days when I was young and when this country didn't even know it had a racial problem. The goal for all of us should be that one day things will be done neither because of nor in spite of any of the differences between us.